And this mix of friendly disagreement with mutual respect worked well until Lewis did something Tolkien really did not approve of. He got married. Now, to understand why this created problems, you need to understand the context. In 1952, Lewis met an American writer named Joy Davidman. He was married with 2 sons. One of them later wrote that she couldn't have had a more different childhood than Lewis had. Lewis's husband at the time was a philanderer, an abusive alcoholic, who later left her for one of her cousins. Consequently, they got divorced, and Joy and her 2 sons moved to England. Having moved to England, she became better friends with Lewis, and when the British government declined to renew her visa in 1956, Lewis then married her in a civil union so she could stay in England. He apparently saw this as a friendly favor. He didn't tell any people about it. He maintained separate homes. They were in for a little while. But that same year, Joy caught cancer. And if he didn't know it already, Lewis knew then that he genuinely loved her. They then got married before an Anglican priest in 1957, and then they were finally telling more people about the fact that they were now married. So, obviously this was an unusual marriage, very unusual setup, and it confused many of Lewis's friends. But for Tolkien, the problem was that Lewis had married a divorced woman. Lewis, he believed that Christians could remarry or they could divorce and remarry if one spouse had committed adultery, which was Joy's case. Her husband had left her, and therefore that made it acceptable. Tolkien, on the other hand, he believed Christians should view divorce as a kind of human abuse and avoid supporting it if at all possible. One of his letters he talks about viewing it with the horror of machines running down badly, so much stricter view. Tolkien would have also objected to the technical phase of Lewis's marriage. Lewis had believed that his first initial civil union with Joy had just been a formality. He believed that a civil union is a contract before the state, not before God. It didn't have the same obligations. There were 2 separate arenas. However, and he had argued even in his book Mere Christianity that you should view civil unions and church marriages as separate things. But Tolkien, however, he criticized that 2-system view in an unfinished letter to Lewis. He talks about a marriage that was held under Lewis's system, as he puts it.
The last Christian marriage I attended was held under your system. The bridal pair were married twice. They married once, and they married one another before the church's witness, a priest, using one set of formulas, and making a vow of lifelong fidelity, and the woman of obedience. Then they married again before the state's witness, a registrar, using another set of formulas, and making no vow of fidelity or obedience. I felt it was an abominable proceeding, and also ridiculous, since the first set of formulas and vows included the latter as the lesser.
So clearly, 2 very different views about divorce and remarriage. And Lewis's marriage to Joy kind of cut to the heart of those differences. Now, Lewis and Tolkien didn't see each other much after Lewis got married, so initially this seems like kind of the straw that broke their friendship. However, meeting people face to face has a way of changing one's views. In 1960, Joy entered a hospital for cancer treatment, and while there she met Tolkien's wife, Edith, who was getting treatment for arthritis. Consequently, when Tolkien visited his wife, he finally met Joy in person. Colin Duriez kind of explains the meeting's effect.
Edith becoming acquainted with Joy brought somewhat of reconciliation between Tolkien and Lewis. Since Lewis's marriage, the 2 friends had seldom met. In fact, his relationship with Joy had cast a gloom over the friendship that had never fully dispersed. It is likely that meeting Joy helped Edith to see Lewis in a new light, and Tolkien to come to terms with his once strange marriage.
Thank you. 3 years later, a little after Joy had passed away, Tolkien did something that showed just how much he had reconciled with Lewis. That year, he visited another hospital. This time he was seeing Lewis, who was being treated for blood poisoning. As Tolkien entered the hospital, he bumped into Joy's son, Douglas. They did not know each other well. Tolkien's only real connection would have been knowing Douglas was the son of a divorced woman who married his friend. Tolkien may or may not have known that Douglas's birth father had committed suicide the past year, another act he would have strongly disapproved of as a Roman Catholic. But according to an interview Douglas gave in 2013, here's what happened when they met.
I know that my mother was dying. I had watched her with cancer for 5 years, but nobody told me that Jack was dying. The closest I came to understanding was when I met J.R.R. Tolkien outside the hospital. I was coming out as he was coming in to visit Jack. They were close friends. He approached me and said, "Hello, Douglas. You probably won't remember me. I'm Professor Tolkien." He He let me know that if anything ever happened to Jack and I had nowhere to go, I could come and live with him.
As if you don't know, Jack was Lewis's nickname. So essentially, he's reaching out to Lewis's stepson, who has no obligation to, kind of hits the core of this strange marriage he didn't fully approve of, by offering that charity in that moment. So to wrap things up, as we look at C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien's friendship, we see some powerful values at play. We see repentance in the way Lewis fought his inherited biases. We see wisdom in the way they made their common beliefs more important than their differences, even as they often challenged those very differences. And we see great charity in Tolkien rethinking his view of Lewis's marriage and reaching out to Lewis's stepson. Today, as many of us work out our religious differences with each other, these values could be more important to remember. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
What's a philanthropist or whatever?
Philologist. So,
Philologist.
yeah, philology is, maybe Dr. Ricky might be able to explain this better, but philology was Tolkien's academic subject. It's the study of languages. So Lewis's background was he was an English literary, he was an English literary scholar. Tolkien was an expert on language. So that's kind of the same topic, but two very different perspectives on the issue. And so they made them kind of, they seem like enemies at times with each other because it's like the same thing with two different lenses.
They were much more allies, though, ultimately, than
Right,
enemies. And what Lewis says in that quote that you had read was
Yeah.
really that the attitude in the English school
Right, yeah.
of that time, because it was a very specific time that he's
Right,
talking about,
exactly.
was anti-philology.
Right, there was this particular...
Lewis was, of the people in the English school, was the one that was more
Right.
into philology than anybody. I mean, we
Right.
know he loves the Norse languages too, and he was part of the Coal-Biters Club, which was like, or he was part, whatever the club they had, which was before the Inklings,
Right.
where they're reading Northern myth and stuff like that. So
Right.
like, that's like philologists love that kind
Right,
of stuff.
yeah.
So, and we know he used to, he read Anglo-Saxon, which Tolkien was a specialist in.
Right.
Anglo-Saxon, Old English, so
Right.
that's philology.
Yeah.
That's part of it. So,
Yeah.
and you may know, those of you who read the Out of the Silent Planet. He's read Out of the Silent Planet. There's a guy walking at the beginning. His name is Ransom. He's taking a long walk. He was a philologist. His name was Ransom, and he was a fellow of an Oxford college. He was a philologist. His name was Ransom. This is the end of his description. He was a philologist. His name was Ransom. He was a fellow of a Cambridge college. He switches it to Cambridge. So Ransom is very much kind of, I think, a kind of Tolkien character. Because then he goes to, if you know the story, he goes to Malacandra,
Right.
and he's able to interpret their language so quickly.
But he's a
he's a
language
philologist.
expert. Yeah, exactly.
Because he's a language expert.
Yeah. Anybody else?
We kind of can't overstate the Northern Ireland situation
Yeah.
that in which Lewis was raised.
Right, exactly.
And so that kind of prejudice
Right.
against Catholics is Tolkien would be wrong to think that being Church of England is the same as being Church of Ireland. And you know what I mean? They're both Protestants and therefore not real friendly to Catholics maybe, but the Northern Ireland situation is real
Yeah.
specific.
Right.
And so it's amazing when you talk about the change in Lewis
Right,
to get to
yeah.
where he did.
Yeah, and it's actually amusing. There's several people have noted that even though Lewis may not have realized it, at times his theology as he went on, it became at times very Catholic in nature. Little bits of it seemed like that.
Lewis's?
Yeah, there's a whole book on that. Lewis in the Catholic Church. He talks about kind of moments where people accuse him of being a secret Catholic because, on occasion, like his beliefs on purgatory or his beliefs on a few different issues were
Well-
very parallel to what Catholic Church teaches, but he was taking the Anglican version of it.
Yeah.
As a
And
whole,
who's
yeah,
been to Oxford? Ken, you've been to Oxford. So did any of you get to St. Mary Magdalene Church? There's St. Mary's where he preached Weight of Glory and the others. There's right down, really like 200 feet away. Okay,
I don't
quarter of a
think I
mile.
know that.
St. Mary Magdalene. That's where he was going the last 10, 15 years of his life, where Lewis went once a week to meet with his confessor.
Right.
So, and it's a high church Anglican. So
Right.
it's Church of England, but really high, so very liturgical, looks and smells very Catholic.
Right.
They just don't want to follow the Pope.
Right.
But so he actually had a confessor, like in other words, like as you would, if you're a Catholic church going to confession, he really adopted, and that really fit his views of mere Christianity. I'll do it, maybe it's not, unless it's evil, wicked, or bad, or somehow really totally unscriptural, you know. So he was, he really did. I think you're absolutely right. He moved much closer, but I don't think he was ever close to, some people claim, to becoming a Catholic. He
Right.
was just,
Yeah.
he was
Sometimes there's
sharing in the good,
Right.
in the riches of the Christian tradition. which
Right.
come with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as you've been doing this research on, friendship despite differences, you said that they decided to lean on what are the good questions
Yeah.
rather than, let's just,
Right.
So, did you figure out what those good questions are? Because we're in a time in life right now where there is very little middle ground in so many things.
Right.
So these people, I thought this was a really interesting topic
Right.
in this day and age, because
Right.
it's so hard to find those questions, I guess,
Yeah.
that we can agree on.
I don't know. I mean, I think they both agreed on the mere Christian faith. I think there are some things they definitely did have very different views on, but I think they would have said, okay, we recognize that we have two very different views on this topic, but we both agree that it's at least important to discuss it. Like their views on burial. So Lewis was in favor of cremation, but Tolkien was not. Tolkien argued that that was, in some sense, a desecration because he's treating the body disrespectfully. Lewis would have said, well, the spirit's gone, so who cares what do you do with it next?
Ooh.
That would have been
Tolkien would definitely not have liked that.
Right, but that would have been the divide of cremation okay because the spirit is gone versus the body is still a temple even though the spirit is gone, so therefore you shouldn't cremate it. Then in that context you would have said, okay, well, at least it's an important topic we agree that is in some sense worth talking about, even if we're taking two very different views on it. And again, it fits in with that sense of they would bring these questions up with each other frequently at Inklings meetings. Depending on how the meeting discussion go, they would debate any number of things and not hold much back.
One other question, where did you what are some of your sources for the research? Because these all sound like things that I want to read at some point.
Right. Well, I relied a lot on there were a couple of two really big books. One of them was called Inklings by Humphrey Carpenter, and that's one of the best known sources on the Inklings and
Published about 1978.
Right, so it's one of the very earliest studies about the Inklings and about their various major players in that. I also read a lot on a book called The Fellowship of the Literary Lives of the Inklings by Philip and Carol Zaleski, and that's a big book. It's a biography about C.S. Lewis, about Tolkien, about Charles Williams, and about Owen Barfield, the big four members of the Inklings and how their lives intersected. And that's maybe the most. I read four or five different biographies about Lewis, and that's maybe one of the most balanced sense of capturing some of the more unusual elements and also capturing the basic story and making it fit together in a whole that really makes sense.
We have them all, I mean, they're all down in the Lewis room.
Yeah.
Here.
And I'm also going to be posting this talk actually as a PDF on my website. So if any of you want, you can easily find it from there. There's a whole sources cited page on that. The blog is
Or you could, if you forget that and you want to write us, I'm sure we can get it from Connor and get it to you
Right.
or
Yeah,
make copies available.
exactly, yeah.